Don't forget Elvis, Greg said jokingly. I never forget Elvis, Susan replied, slightly annoyed. I can take him with me around the house, but when I go to bed, he's always there. Look after me. She was too old to take him to bed with her, so she put him in his usual place, facing the bed. The rest of the shelves and cabinets were filled with framed photos and mementos, but no other plush toys. In fact, on this wall, Elvis was the only thing that really belonged to her. Susan had had him since she was a little girl, and she didn't want to part with him. When she was 7 years old and he was falling apart, she made him a white suit. It had a high collar, flared pants, and tiny sequins. She wasn't skilled enough to sew the garment to fit, so it was sewn to his body. And that was better because it preserved his integrity. He used to be Edward, but the day the outfit was finished, they renamed him. Elvis watched them get into bed. Next time we go to the cabin, I'll fix the dock. It's wobbly, Greg said. You said that last time, she replied. I know, but last time I forgot the tools. Do you mind going alone? I thought you liked staying in the cabin. To be honest, I'm getting a little tired of it. Excuse me. Greg inherited the cabin from his grandfather, as well as the house in Southport. My grandfather was a moderately successful author of novels set in the Lake District. He'd built the cabin with royalties from his first book. Then, when he finished the manuscripts of subsequent novels, he retired to the cabin for final editing. He said he enjoyed the peace and quiet. The cabin was situated on the south shore of Water Lake, which at a mile long was the largest of the Cumbrian Highland glacial lakes. The house was insulated and had running water, but electricity came from a gasoline generator and heating was provided by a wood stove. There was also a tiny boathouse here, big enough for a rowboat. The road to Eskdale passes through Burker Fell. Just south of Eskdale itself, there is a place to park your car. From there, you have to cross the road and walk to Devook Water. While staying there, Greg and Susan enjoyed the solitude. The only people they saw were the occasional fishermen or other tourists. Greg had always led a comfortable lifestyle. He inherited 2 small but successful businesses from his family. Wool and shipbuilding continued to flourish in Cumbria. These days, he only drops in occasionally, traveling more often to London to meet with the family accountants and lawyers. They met Susan at the Royal Birkdale Golf Club. Greg had just played 18 holes and Susan was serving the bar. He was completely overwhelmed. During their wedding, everyone had been looking and whispering that barmaids weren't right for the Clifford family. And after all, she was 12 years younger than he was. But Greg brushed that aside. By Clifford standards, Susan was ordinary. But she was sexy and full of fun. In any case, the family estate would eventually go to their children, not her. They stayed at the cabin 5 or 6 times a year. Susan enjoyed the peace and quiet, but could do without the walks. The paths were never dry, and lately the solitude did without walks. The paths were never dry, and lately the loneliness had begun to tire her. Getting back to nature is certainly a good thing, but a TV wouldn't hurt either. Jack Ducker, a local resident and family friend, sometimes came here and looked after the house. To help him out, Greg bought him his first cell phone. They had been married for almost 3 years now, and Susan was bored. She never had any money when she was single, but she seemed to have a lot more fun. She hoped her children would satisfy her, but so far they had had no luck. They had recently undergone a checkup that showed Greg had no problems. But Susan was prescribed a course of extra hormones. One day she overheard Greg discussing it on the phone with a family member. The phrase, "I'm sure she's good breeding material," stuck in her mind. He may have been defending her in his own way, but he'd said she looked like a horse. That didn't give her any comfort. What would he do if she couldn't get pregnant? Greg was an only child, the last in his lineage to carry the last name Clifford. The family would be furious if a mere barmaid inherited everything, so children were a necessity. She secretly went for more checkups. And then one Thursday, the fateful phone call came. "Hello, Mrs. Clifford. This is Birkdale Fertility Clinic. Would you agree to receive your results over the phone? Or would you prefer to see a specialist?" "It's all right. Tell me now, please." "I'm afraid I have some bad news. We've rechecked your results and I'm sorry to tell you that you're infertile." "No, is IVF suitable?" "I'm sorry, but it won't work." "So it's adoption or nothing?" "I'm afraid so. Can I mail you the results?" "No, thank you. I'll pick them up next time I'm in town." That was a serious blow. While the kids were out of town, she and Greg had been discussing various possibilities. And just when their problems were about to be resolved, Greg announced that he wasn't interested in adopting. Susan was terrified that he might now divorce her. He had brought her into another world, a world of privilege. But now Susan wasn't sure she had ever truly loved him. She wasn't cut out to be one of those ladies who attended dinner parties. That kind of lifestyle weighed on her. Yes, she had money, but she didn't have many friends her age. The only friend she's had so far is Dee. If Susan couldn't ask her for advice from time to time, she'd go crazy. Greg is a good man, but Susan was stumped. She didn't want to give up the trappings of wealth, and at the same time, she didn't really want the husband who came along with them. But she would have a hard time with the divorce. She brought nothing to this marriage except the hope of children. Susan was sure adoption wouldn't suit him. It would dilute the family line or something. She realized she had married him for his money and security. Not the most pleasant thought, but it was true. And if she can't produce children to inherit, her position may become untenable. Greg is still young enough to find someone fertile. She married to escape a life of poverty. Now he can go back there. The best outcome would be if Greg dies soon. Then she could receive the inheritance and enjoy the wealth on her own terms. Susie read somewhere that there is a fine line between love and hate. If she doesn't love Greg, she must learn to hate him. Then she should have no trouble killing him. She needs two things. First, more reasons to hate Greg. 2, a plan to get rid of him. Perhaps with the help of an accomplice. There was a knock at the door. A man in overalls, holding a tray, said, "Delivery for Mr. Clifford." On the tray, which looked more like a shallow plastic box, were half a dozen jerk crabs. "Excuse me, I need to pick up the box, ma'am. Would you mind fetching a bucket of water?" Susan did so, and the guy tipped them into the water. She noticed that their claws were fastened with rubber bands to keep them from attacking each other, he said, as if he had read her mind. "You can keep the rubber bands. How long will they last like this?" "A couple days. Longer if you have a section in the refrigerator with a temperature of 0 degrees. She took the bucket into the kitchen. It was typical of Greg to organize something without consulting her. She had a vague idea of steaming the crabs, but she didn't know where to start. A wave of rebellion rose up inside her. Screw it, they could eat them tomorrow. She hadn't had potato casserole with meat in a long time, and she was going to make it tonight. It was time to eat something she liked. "How delicious, Susan," he said. "Did you make this?" "Of course I did." "Did you bring fresh crabs?" "Yes, but where are they?" "I flushed them down the toilet." His face painted a picture. Did he imagine she was capable of such a thing? "Just kidding, they're in the kitchen in a bucket of water. It would be great if you steamed them or had a chef cook them. Of course, when we're done, I'll put them in the Euro section of the fridge. By the way, did you know that the last part of making potato casserole with meat is getting it ready in the oven?" "Yes, but if we ever eat it again, why not try putting a layer of grated cheese on top?" Susan felt herself getting even angrier. Potato casserole might have been a common dish only for people like him, but she knew how to make it. And she didn't need that damn cheese on top, and it didn't escape her that Greg had said, "If we ever eat this again." She picked up Elvis from the kitchen counter and returned him to his cubbyhole before going to bed. When Greg came to bed, she rejected his advances. Now is not the time to have children. Better save your own. So her hatred for him began to brew in her. Well, hostility anyway. But likely candidates for accessory to murder, as far as she knew, were not common in the circles in which they revolved. So who among those lower on the social scale than her could be persuaded? Even seduce? "While you're gone," she said the next morning, "I'm going to go into town and fix my laptop. It's acting up again. Go to Netflix, they do a good job." "I'm going." "No, why don't you try it? Just go." Susan had already decided to use their services. She thought one of their employees was clumsy. If there was such a thing as a nerdy guy with muscles, this was it. She climbed into her Mercedes SL 500 Roadster. Once she was in town, the first thing she did was call Netflix. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Clifford?" She'd always disliked the manager, who was more annoying than polite. "The last time I had a problem, this young man was very helpful. I'm sure he'll do a good job this time, too." "This is Roger," the manager said reluctantly. She joined Roger at his workbench. "Before we begin, may I offer you some coffee, Mrs. Clifford?" "Please call me Susan." "Yes, I'd love to." "All right, Susan, milk and sugar." "Just a little milk, please." It was probably instant and she wouldn't drink the drink again, but she liked Roger and coffee would brighten up the visit. She set the computer on the workbench. The surface was a little dirty, so she pulled another chair over to put her purse on it. A Fendi, more expensive than the laptop. As she stood up, she bumped into Roger, forgetting how quickly she could drink a cup of instant tea. She cringed as the hot Nescafe spilled out onto her Coco Chanel t-shirt. She'd left the house without a bra, and Roger, who already couldn't take his eyes off her breasts, was now gawking at them. She pinched her shirt and pulled it off. "Shit, I'm so sorry," he said. Then he covered his mouth with his hand. "I'm sorry, you idiot," the manager yelled. Susan regained her composure. "It's okay, it's totally my fault," she turned to Roger. "Would you mind walking me to your bathroom?" Roger led her to the back of the store. "Can I get you anything?" "Another shirt, please?" Susan took off hers and wandered to the back of the store. "Can I get you anything?" "Another shirt, please?" Susan took off hers and soaked it under the faucet, then used it to wash the sticky coffee stains off her chest. The door opened and Roger appeared. He held out her shirt and stared at her topless in the mirror. She turned and met his gaze. "It looks like you've once again come to the finish line faster than I expected." She was proud of that phrase and smiled as his face turned even redder. He muttered another apology and, to his credit, looked her in the eye. Then he withdrew, leaving her with a large gray t-shirt with the company logo on it in her hands. Back at his workbench, he still looked confused. "Your phone rang while you were changing," he said. Susan looked up. It was Greg, who was probably checking on her. She ignored him. "Would you like some more coffee?" "Are you on your lunch break, Roger?" "Yes, in about half an hour." "What's the manager's name?" "Mr. Brogum." "Mr. Brogum, I need to take my shirt to the dry cleaners. Is it all right if Roger comes with me and we have coffee at Costa? I'll explain my computer problems to him and then I'll go home. He'll call me when it's fixed." Of course, Mrs. Clifford. As soon as she told him about the problems, the temptation faded. "Dry cleaning isn't the most romantic setting, but it'll do." "Will you be working tomorrow, Roger?" "No, it's my Saturday off." "Are you doing anything special?" "Not really, Susan." "Then how about this? I have a couple of errands to run in town, and then I'll go home and call your Mr. Brougham. I'll tell him you've been a real gentleman and I want you to fix my laptop." "Great. When you're done, take it with you. And tomorrow, come back here and get my shirt. Bring it and my laptop into the house and your debt will be paid." He doesn't really owe her anything. But if he thought he did, it would strengthen her position. She paid the receptionist and gave Roger the receipt. "No problem." "Okay, my husband leaves to play golf until 9, so why don't you come up after 9:15? Sure. My address is in your files, but I'll give you my cell phone number just in case. When you get there, we can check your laptop on site. When you arrive, we can test your laptop on site." At the Costa Dry Cleaners, Susan leaned back in her chair and pulled up her t-shirt, studying the logo upside down. Her nipples tensed. "Netflix," she stretched out. "Do you like working there?" "So far so good, but I'm above them." "What do you mean?" Now that he was in familiar territory, he spoke more confidently. "They just have experience. I'm saving up to start my own business. Like Netflix, but at a higher level. And I'll be creating things, not just repairing them." Roger was describing one of his gadgets when something in his words caught her attention. "Now I just call it a gizmo and it looks kind of crude." "So what does it do?" "You walk into a room, push a button, and point the device in a circle. It beeps and lights up red if there's anything electrical. And the beeping gets faster the closer you get to it. You can tell if there are bugs, spy bugs, not insects. I think I saw something like that in a movie." "Yeah, but mine's better. It even beeps if the device is off, but you get a yellow light instead. Listen, could you bring it by tomorrow? Show me your thing, and maybe I'll show you mine." Oh, great. Either he didn't get the hint or his blush was now under control. She lowered her gaze to her breasts. "Well, now you've seen them, and what do you think?" He blushed again. She wondered how far she could take him. What could he be willing to do for more? Or for money to start a business? "You're very pretty," he purred. "Thank you, though I'm sure a handsome young man like you has prettier girls, but I don't have a girlfriend." "But you must have seen enough breasts." "No, not as pretty as yours." "That's nice. Do a good job on my laptop and I might show them to you again." At the fertility clinic, Susan introduced herself at the front desk. "Are you here to fix our computer?" "No, I borrowed this shirt." "I'm Mrs. Clifford, and I'm here to pick up your test results." "Mrs. Clifford, of course we spoke to you on the phone." When she returned to the house, she found that Mrs. Fryer had already arrived and went inside. Susan wished she hadn't knocked. It was normal for the cook to have a key, but it was rude to just walk in like that. She had mentioned this to Greg before, but he didn't see it as a problem. I hear you're having trouble with the steam crabs. Where are they? Here, Susan answered, opening the refrigerator. Oh my God, not a good start. I should have kept them in a bucket of water. In fact, she did an excellent job, and soon Susan was admiring the appetizing-looking crab salad. That looks good. Greg should be home any minute. I'll wait for him. No, he won't like that. He's having lunch at the golf club and asked me to put the salads in the fridge for tonight. Said you'd have to settle for one last casserole. Fortunately, Mrs. Fryer left before Susan could reply. She was furious. You'll have to, you arrogant bastard! So he's calling the cook about his dinner plans, not me, she muttered aloud and busied herself with preparing tonight's meal. She ate the rest of the cold potato casserole. Then she called Dee and poured her heart out, but without mentioning the murder. Finally, I called Roger. What are you doing tonight? Do you mind if an older woman joins you? No, you'd better come back tomorrow. She was still furious when Greg came in. How dare you tell Mrs. Fryer about our diet and not warn me? What? I was just trying to help. I called your cell phone, but you didn't answer. Susan ignored the call. I felt like an idiot expecting you to come and have lunch with me. And that stupid woman who knew you were at the club was just messing with me. I'm sure that's not true. You weren't here. You'll never be here. It's not fair. She walked off upstairs, leaving Greg to sit and stare at his salad. When I came back, he was still there. Where are you going? Out with a friend. And you're dressed like that? Susan looked at herself. Okay, this skirt is the shortest and the heels are the highest. And the lilac blouse is sheer, emphasizing the lack of a bra. What's wrong with the way I'm dressed? It's just clothes. I've worn them before. She hasn't worn them without me. So now you have to inspect my clothes before you let me go outside? Do you want me to lift up my skirt so you can see if I'm wearing panties? Maybe I'm naked in here. Don't be so rude, and there's no need to be dramatic. You can wear what you like. It was just an observation. He stared at her breasts. Not the first man to do that today. It's cold outside, Susan. You'll freeze. I have a coat. Where are you going? Why should I tell you? You haven't told me where you are all day. Very well. With whom? With Dee. A car horn sounded outside. That's my cab. Is there something wrong with your car? No, but we'll probably have a few drinks. But I've never played billiards before. It's all right, said Roger. I'll teach you. Why is it so quiet in here? The main bar is full of people. There's a snooker league team in this pub, but it's all mixed up. They usually play midweek, but today they have an away match. Greg threw the last of his salad in the garbage can. He'd told Mrs. Fryer countless times that he didn't like tomatoes, but she never remembered. Or maybe she remembered, but just disagreed. Today was not a good day. Susan hadn't been in the best mood lately, but he didn't know why. He thought about her offer to look up her skirt. Had it been a bluff? Surely she didn't go out without her panties on. With your left hand, spread your fingers like this, forming a stable bridge. Roger took her wrist. Like this? Yes, and with your right hand hold the thick end of the cue firmly. His right hand encircled hers. Are you sure this is the cue I'm holding? He was breathing in her ear, and she guessed it was his arousal touching her skirt. Greg wandered around the bedroom, not quite sure what he was looking for. In the bathroom, he pulled a cellophane bag from the trash can. Crotchless pantyhose. His wife had gone outside without a bra, wearing crotchless pantyhose. Then, against his better judgment, he looked in the laundry basket where he found a gray Netflix t-shirt. He pulled it out and sniffed it. She smelled like Susan. Elvis sat on the tank and watched him. Do you know anything about this? Asked Greg. I think you want to teach me pool so you can paw me with your hands. A different type of pool would be more suitable for that. I'll teach you to breaststroke. Cheeky bastard, why do I have to bend over so much? Your chin has to touch the cue to line up your shot properly. Why do you have to bend so close to me? To make sure I put you in the best position possible, Roger replied. His confidence grew. To make sure I put you in the best position, Roger replied. His confidence grew. You just want me to bend over so people can look up my skirt. There's no one here to peek. But if it bothers you, I can protect your short skirt from prying eyes. How? He let go of her hands and stood directly behind her. Then, wrapping his arms around her waist, he pressed his crotch against her. Something hard pressed against my ass. That's my thing. If you want, you can take it home tonight. Take me home too. I'll press something else on your ass. He took the bait. Downstairs, Greg poured himself a glass of Aberlour. What's going on? Is there any reason to be suspicious? He picked up the phone. Dee, how are you? Hi, Greg, I'm fine. How are you? Honestly, I'm a little worried about Susan. I know you girls are like friends. Is there anything I should know? Nursing, Greg, I can't tell you. But no, it's fine as far as I'm concerned. Perhaps you should come over for lunch. She always feels better after talking to you. It was a pleasure they said goodbye. So Dee's home, but Susan's not with her, or she'd know about it. She left with the look of a fallen woman and lied about where she would be. Roger wanted to get in the cab with her. You can drop me off on the way. Susan decided that the flirting had gone far enough for one evening. So she said he would have to walk home. But to keep him interested, she kissed him goodnight. A long, wet kiss. See you tomorrow. Saturday morning, Greg was restless and looked in the laundry basket again. At least Susan had been wearing panties last night, albeit black ones. They were lying there along with crotchless tights. He headed for the golf course. Susan looked in the laundry basket again. At least Susan had been wearing panties last night, albeit black ones. They were also lying there along with crotchless pantyhose. He went to the golf course. Susan got up and took a quick shower. Last night had been so much fun, she couldn't remember the last time she had been in a proper pub. Roger had responded to her flirting and made advances too, but kept his distance. He was due any minute, so she left her hair damp and pulled on another t-shirt and the shortest of shorts. Come in, Roger. Are you hungover? No, I need another beer. Here's your stuff. Great, I'll check the t-shirt first. She took it out of the dry cleaning bag and removed the one she was wearing. Roger looked at her bare breasts again. This time he smirked instead of blushing. She pulled her shirt back on and stood in front of the mirror. Then ran her hands down the front. Come here for a moment. He stood behind her and looked at their reflections. I feel some sharpness right here where I managed to pour the coffee. What do you say? Susan grabbed his hands and put them on his chest. Is it still stiff? He ran his hands up and down the material, returned to her breasts and squeezed the bumps. It's definitely hard here, he said. It's hard for me too. Nothing much in terms of foreplay, but she decided it was best to take her time. You're a bad boy. They checked her laptop and then sat down in the living room with coffee. It was time to broach the subject. I know you want more from me, Roger, and you think I'm teasing you. So it's time to lay the cards on the table. Do you want to have sex with me? Yes. She took the coffee from him and set it on the low table next to her stuffed animal. Then she put one of his hands between her thighs. She knew it was warm and moist there. He squeezed her. Feel how you turn me on, Roger. I want everything you want. Maybe we can make a deal. What kind of deal? Susan took his hand away and told him everything. It took a while and she poured it all out, describing what a horrible outcast husband she was. Roger nodded and seemed shocked by her vile suggestion. She worked on his manhood and drove him to the finish line, thus sealing the deal. When he left, she took Elvis away. Not a word from you. When Greg got home, Susan was sitting at his computer. Can I ask you something? He asked. Sure. Why was there a Netflix t-shirt in the laundry basket? When I took my laptop in for repair, one of the guys spilled coffee on my Chanel. I had to take it to the dry cleaners, and Netflix lent me one of theirs. I see. How long have you been wearing crotchless tights? Susan stopped and turned to face him. What have you been doing, Greg? Sniffing all the dirty laundry? Would you rather not answer? I'll answer if you want me to. But why are you checking? You first. Since May what? Since May, I've been wearing crotchless pantyhose. When we went for fertility tests, they diagnosed a mild form of thrush and prescribed a uterine ring and synestasin. We had to abstain from sex for a week. Do you remember? Yeah. After it was over, I started wearing crotchless pantyhose. They're more sanitary. If you'd looked up my skirt when I proposed, you'd have seen this. Or would you rather I went for a night out in stockings? I have a few clues. Now answer me. You don't have to be so aggressive. I saw a t-shirt in the laundry basket and I was curious. And at the same time, I noticed a plastic bag of pantyhose. I didn't realize you'd been wearing them all summer. Susan thought, no, you don't notice my underwear. You don't notice anything at all. Greg thought that answer was good, but you lied about going to see Dee. Sunday morning, they calmed down and were being polite. Greg wondered if he'd been a little rude to Susan. He had always been polite, but he was more used to giving directions. He decided to put off her mysterious evening until later. Okay, She'd shown up without a bra and in a bad mood, but he didn't want to fall for another plausible explanation. You know we're having lunch at the golf club? Yeah, I'll be ready by 12 o'clock. Do you mind if I get there an hour early? I bought a new long start club and I'd like to practice on the course. No problem. I need to do some laundry. Susan was standing at the sink in the utility room. After the infection, she carefully washed and rinsed all the laundry by hand. On the way to the garage, Greg stopped behind her and stroked her ear. Friends again? Sure. She turned and kissed him. But I won't hold you, my hands are wet. Did you take everything? Of course I did. He closed the door, and Susan heard the main garage door slam as he started his Land Rover. Her Mercedes was already in the driveway, and she waited until the door slammed shut and picked up her phone. Greg slapped his forehead with the palm of his hand. He'd left his new putter right by the front door. And that was after she'd asked if he'd taken everything. He slipped back quietly and picked up the bag. Then he listened. Have you thought about it, Roger? That's a lot of money, not to mention the nasty things you'll do to me. Yeah, I tried your thing. It's fantastic. The first scan of our bedroom revealed everything electronic, including the light switches. All yellow. The second time it flashed red when it found my cell phone charging. No need to check the other rooms. I prefer sex on a big bed. Well, maybe the headboard. You said you wanted to see everything. There was a pause while Roger spoke. Did you mean it? Yes, but you should bring condoms. We'll do it the next time he's away and you can have everything. I'll put all the appliances in the bedroom, and no one but Elvis will be watching us. In the meantime, we need a plan to get rid of Greg. He quietly slipped out of the car and let the Land Rover idle down the road before starting the engine. When he got to the field, he couldn't concentrate and headed for the bar. The alcohol didn't help, and he became addicted to pineapple juice. It wasn't hard to guess that her lover Roger works at Netflix. But getting rid of him sounds ominous. Did she mean to get him out of the way so she could have sex? Or did she mean to kill him? Their sex life had always been good, albeit a little erratic. And now they were trying to have a baby. At least Susan had insisted on using a condom with this Roger, though it didn't matter now. No more promises of sex and sinister plots. He was furious. Instead of ending this, he wanted to catch her in the act and divorce her. The fact that some of his family members had hinted at it when he married the barmaid made him even angrier. Now he'll have to live with the awkwardness of their stares. I told you that bitch should suffer. And Roger Rabbit will get his share too. Other men's wives are out of reach. May I join you, old man? What poison should I give you? Marcus, welcome. Just a pineapple, please, I'm driving. Marcus is back with the drinks. I drink brandy myself. Of course, Greg replied. All doctors are alcoholics. That's true, he admitted. And all the nurses are smokers. Are you without your better half today? She'll be here soon. You must join us for lunch, but I'd like to clear my head first. Ha, if given the chance, I wouldn't have chosen them. When God gave out brains, I think he mistook brains for sewers. No thanks, they stink, I said. Marcus had told this joke before, but he burst into laughter anyway. When the laughter died down, Greg made his statement. You're aware of all this information technology nonsense, aren't you? Suzanne, I'm going to London on Tuesday, Greg said, and I'm staying overnight. Great, I'll invite Dee. That's a good idea. It's Tuesday. I've already checked into my room. I'll have an early night. I have a meeting with my lawyers tomorrow morning. Okay, Susan said. It's only going to be one night, so you'd better have fun tonight. Fun? I thought you were inviting Dee. Yeah, she'll be here soon. Greg sipped his single malt and wondered what she was really up to. Probably already lying on their bed having sex. Checking the bedroom for recording devices wasn't easy, but he liked the idea of taking a picture of her. Not that it turned him on, more as a safety net in case Plan A didn't work. Susan checked the caller ID as soon as they hung up. Yes, the call was from the Lancaster Gate Hotel. She called them, I have a meeting tomorrow with Mr. Clifford from Southport. Can you please confirm that he arrived safely? Yes, he checked in. May I connect you with him? No need, I'll meet him in the morning. Then she called Dee to clarify the situation. Roger was due to arrive soon. Susan walked to the bedroom and turned on the electrical appliance. She found all the usual things, but nothing out of the ordinary. She checked to make sure the curtains were closed, then went into the bathroom and put on her lipstick. Studied herself in the mirror, irresistible. He was infatuated, and her makeup would soon be ruined. but it's better to show herself in all her glory. With Greg dead, she'll slowly mess it up. Or if he's a good lover, maybe she'll keep it to herself. What did the Americans call it? A sex buddy. But she was going to enjoy today, whether Roger carried out her plan or not. Soon they were in her bedroom. Susan was standing in front of him, wearing only a thong, which he gladly removed himself. "My girls are here again," she said, "and they like the way you like it." Roger was very happy to oblige. He undressed as he played with them and carelessly tossed a packet of condoms on the bed. "I hope you took plenty." "We still have plenty of time." When he undressed, she sat on the bed and began pleasuring his manhood. In a minute, he was hard as a rock. "Very good," she said, leaning back to admire him. "Look at that. I learned that trick when I was a bartender." She opened the condom and put it in her mouth. Then with her lips, she pulled it over herself. "Aren't you afraid you might hurt him?" he asked. "No, a lot of practice." "Are you doing this for your husband?" It's not nice to mention him. Susan wasn't doing it for her husband, of course. They were supposed to be trying to have a baby. And now that she knew she was infertile, there was no need to use it with anyone. But there was no point in discussing it with Roger either. And if she was trying so hard to keep it a secret, it would be foolish to pick up a sexually transmitted infection at the last minute. Fuck me now, I'm burning with desire. Just enjoy it for the first time. When you're ready again, you can satisfy me too. He didn't have to say it twice. Susan loved the way he held her face in his hands and kissed her. It was extraordinarily romantic. Despite her instructions, he was gentle and took his time. She put her arms around him and pulled him to her. He picked up speed, and soon the smell of his sweat overpowered the scent of his own deodorant. She loved it. Her legs encircled his waist without any conscious effort on her part. She grabbed his hips fiercely and reached for his buttocks. Roger reached under her buttocks too and inserted a finger into her ass. He then began fucking her harder, feeling the cum rising from his balls. Pulling his face away from hers and leaning back, he reached the finish line and grunted. Susan was surprised to find that she too had climaxed. With Greg, it had taken much longer. For a moment, she wondered if it was because of Roger himself or the depravity of someone else. She closed her eyes tightly and moaned loudly. This was glorious. She was ecstatic. What a stud. Netflix prided itself on always keeping the customer satisfied. Susan smiled at him as they both pulled away from their high. It was a very different Roger now, confident and even joking. Perhaps he was someone worth protecting. Go to the bathroom and get rid of the condom. Make sure it's flushed. And then come over here and give me a hug. He came back and looked at the shelf on the wall. I've seen that plush toy before. It looks like Elvis. And this is him. Roger climbed onto the bed and they snuggled together. I'm very slutty, she explained. Me too, I want to try everything. I got the impression that you might like what I have to offer. God, yes, Susan raised herself up on her elbow. But you know I need your help to kill my husband. And when he's gone, I'll be rich enough to start my own business. Yes, you think I'm interested. Well, you said you might be willing, but you're worried about the risk. So I'll tell you my plan. If you reject it, there'll be no more sex. We'll just leave. But if you accept, you can stay all night and get enough money to get started. Okay, first, get some Rohypnol or something. No problem. Great, here's the plan. We've got a cottage in the Lake District near Water. The flight to Liverpool, the nearest airport to Southport, landed late Wednesday night. It was short but hectic. The wind ruffled Greg's coat as he walked to his car. The cell phone rang. It was Jack Dacre. There was a big storm here last night. It ripped your moorings. It washed ashore, so I tied it to one of your mooring poles. Thank you, Jack. Do you think it can be repaired? Sure, but you'll have to replace one of the mooring poles. What's left of it's rotted, and a dozen meters of strong rope would be nice. All right, I'll come when the weather improves. Is everything else still worth it? Yes, the cabin is fine, and so is your little boathouse. There are lots of logs under the tarp, and I put some more rocks around the edge to keep the wind out. Before we left, Greg called Dee. Yes, she was at his house last night keeping Susan company. No, she hadn't been driving, but had come home in a cab around 11. It was all very believable until she overplayed her hand. And last Friday when you called me, were you worried about her? Yes, I forgot to mention, but she was with me that night too. I didn't say anything then because you invited me to dinner, and I like to cook at Mrs. Fryer's. You haven't lived up to expectations yet. I'm sorry, Dee, I'll do it soon. So Susan had gone to Dee's that night he left. But Greg knew that if she was there, Why hadn't Dee mentioned it then? And why mention it now, unless she had been asked to? I'm home, Susan. Do you miss me? He always called her by her first name, never. Not baby, not favorite, not sweetheart. Now it was beginning to annoy her too, and he was late. I missed you, but while you're gone, Elvis always takes care of me. They hugged. Well, thank him for me. But now his duties are done. I will. How do I feel? Mrs. Fryer left a Lancashire roast in the oven. It'll be ready in about 20 minutes. They ate at the dining room table. Susan would have preferred to sit on a tray in front of the television. She wrinkled her nose as Greg sliced a wedge of Lancashire cheese. What was this obsession with eating cheese with everything? The hot pot was just lamb stew with sliced potatoes on top. Nothing more than a cottage cheese pie. Who would eat cheese with that? I need to get to the cabin. Jack said we almost lost our mooring. Can it be fixed? That's the first thing I asked. Yes, it can. And the forecast says the bad weather should stop this weekend. Tomorrow I'll go to my usual supplier and buy 2 new mooring poles and a couple of hoses. Hoses? Metal hoses. You know, you dig a hole. You put the hose in, fill it with sand, dig the hole, put the hose in, fill it with sand, put the mooring pole in. A shovelful of cement and it's done. It's too wet to drive a stake straight into the ground. I'll do both. You got it. You need any help? I thought you said you didn't want to go this time, but it sounds like fun. Sign me up then this weekend. We'll head out Friday after breakfast and do the whole thing in daylight. By the way, have you seen my cell phone? Susan asked. I could have sworn I left it on the coffee table. I think I saw it by the bed when I was exercising. I'm going clubbing for a couple hours. Do you want to join me? Not this time. I have some hand washing to do. Oh, great. Roger, everything has to be done this weekend. Then you're going to have to take a sick day. You need Friday and Saturday off. Don't worry, you won't be working there long. Meet me at Costa's tomorrow at lunchtime. Susan went back downstairs with the phone. The plan was coming together. On Thursday after work, Roger picked up the rental car. He would love for his friends to see him driving around in the Toyota Land Cruiser, but he had to keep it a secret. Too bad he'd have to pick her up Saturday night. But if Susan helps with the money, he'll soon be able to afford his own car. Early Friday morning, Roger pulled onto the M6 highway. Once off the highway, the GPS led him to a small parking lot from which he could drive up to the barn. He didn't need to go off-road, but such a car would look less conspicuous in these parts. He took off his shoes and put on his new hiking boots. Susan had bought them for him, and they were the most expensive pair he'd ever owned. They were comfortable, but he still put on an extra pair of socks. Then, in full wet weather gear and with his backpack, he set off for Devoke Water. By the time he reached the hut, he was starving. The hut nestled on the shore in a small cove between 2 bays. The only building on the south side, it was hard to miss, but the view of the pier was still comforting. He looked around. Not a single tree could be seen around the lake, but strangely enough, there was a small island to the left of it that was overgrown with trees. He wondered why they were growing in the center and nowhere else. To his right, on the far shore, was an old stone boathouse that looked abandoned and creepy. He settled as comfortably as he could behind a rock ledge. It hadn't rained, but the grass was still wet. In fact, it had been wet underfoot throughout the entire hike. Lunchtime was almost upon us, and Roger opened his flask of soup and sat down. Okay, a few hours he could stand it. Tonight he would sleep in a warm cabin with the beautiful Suzanne. He had barely finished the first sandwich when he heard them approaching. God, he was only 1 whore ahead of them. They crossed the last small beck, both carrying backpacks larger than his. They were carrying materials to repair the pier. These sleeves are heavier than I thought, Greg remarked. It's a good thing you went too. Are we going to do everything now or in the morning? I forgot. First, we'll do the usual procedure in the cabin. Then we'll do everything today while it's still daylight. Susan didn't like routines, but this one made sense. She went into the house and Greg started the generator. Then he took a long time to fire up the wood stove, using the driest logs from the stack by the stone fireplace. Susan went around the house, opened all the windows to allow air exchange, and opened all the shutters. Then she opened a bottle of red wine and poured it into a decanter. It was one of the bottles Greg had brought here on their last visit. Then she went back inside, closed the windows and the shutters, and the cabin warmed up. She pulled out their special glasses. They were released after the Lord of the Rings movie came out. On her glass was a picture of Legolas, her lover. On his, of course, was Aragorn. When are we going to drink the wine? she asked. As soon as we finish the pier. She looked at the Row Hypno tablet, but at the last moment decided to put it in his glass. Then she went to make the bed. 3 hours later, the pillars were in place. It's too cold to watch the sunset outside. Let's get into the warmth. In the morning, we'll christen the pier and ride the boat for an hour. They made themselves comfortable on the old couch. I'll go pour some wine, Susan said, and went to the kitchen, returning with glasses. Let's have a toast, Greg suggested. Get up. They stood in front of the fireplace. To the next Clifford, he announced. I have a feeling he or she may be conceived tonight. Susan smiled, and they clinked glasses. I've got an idea, Greg said excitedly. Take the pen. She went to the old sideboard and found one. Greg hurried to the kitchen and returned with a cork and a bottle of wine. They sat down on the couch again, and Greg wrote October 17th, 2014 on the cork, then GC, and handed it to Susan. Now put a plus under my initials and add your own. It will be a reminder of this visit to our home. Our last visit, she thought. It was still light when Roger saw the signal. He knew which window was the bedroom. The curtains were closed and the light was turned on and off 3 times. He got up and headed for the cabin. About 6 o'clock in the evening, the little rowboat reached the middle of the lake. There, the oars were raised and the boat rocked alarmingly as something heavy plunged into the icy water of Devoke, always cold at any time of the year. Something heavy slowly sank to the bottom of the lake to a depth of 14 meters. The only witnesses were a few large brown trout, but they weren't interested, at least not yet. At 5 minutes past 9 on Sunday morning, the phone rang at a house in Southport. Hello, is this the Southport rental service? May I speak to Mrs. Clifford? I'm sorry, she's not home. Do you know when she'll be back? I have no idea. Hello, Sergeant? Could you come down to reception, please? Some people want to report a missing person. Right, send them down to interview room 2. Would you like tea or coffee? No, thanks. I've seen the programs on TV. Police snacks are always terrible. So let's start with your name and who's missing. My name is Greg Clifford. I live at 8 Blackpool Road, Southport. My wife Susan is missing. When was the last time you saw her? Friday the 17th. I left early to go to our house in the lakes and she stayed at home. Detective Sergeant Fleming later studied his notes. Let me recount the events in chronological order. I understand that on Thursday the 9th, your wife said she would visit her friend Dee Watson the following evening. But on Friday night, she announced that she was actually seeing a younger lover, and you would have to learn to live with that. After that, she left dressed like a fallen woman, to use your own expression. Can you tell me what she was wearing? A see-through blouse with no bra and a short skirt. She had no panties under the skirt, just crotchless pantyhose. Are you sure? Yes, she lifted up her skirt, showed it to me, and said that until she got home, Roger would have her. And what was your reaction to that? I didn't want to lose her. I decided to think about it and see if it wears off in her system. I thought it might be one last fling before we had children. Then you left for London on the night of the 14th. Yes, I told Susan before I left that she had until the weekend to finish the affair or get a divorce. On Thursday, I asked her if she wanted to go to the cabin with me the next day. She loves the solitude of DeWolf Water, and I thought a trip might fix that. She said she'd think about it. But you didn't go? No, you say you went to the lake by yourself and repaired the pier. Right, but they didn't stay the weekend. They came back the same night. Why? I thought she might take advantage of my absence to have sex with this Roger guy. But then he got worried she might run off with him and thought they might steal things or empty the bank accounts. And you say everything was fine in the house, but your wife wasn't there? Why didn't they report her missing right away? Because he gave her until the end of the weekend. She didn't seem to take anything of value, so I kept my word. Yesterday, Sunday, was her last chance to return if she went somewhere else for the last dirty weekend. And the phone call on Sunday? The rental car company wanted to talk to her. Now that I think about it, it's really weird. Her Mercedes is parked in the garage, so I can't imagine why she'd want another car. Excuse me, Mr. Clifford, but we need to check your house. Can we go over there right now? Sure, no problem. Like I said, I've seen all the TV shows, so I realized that I, a person of interest, am the last person to see her alive, he thought. Thanks for the insight. I'll go and find a female colleague. Could you come into the bedroom for a moment, Mr. Clifford? Constable Gorton called out. What can I do for you? Sergeant Fleming mentioned a lilac blouse, but I don't see it. I've checked your back room. There's no clothes in there, washed or soiled, or in the laundry basket. God, I didn't even think of that. Greg rummaged through the drawers and clothes closet for a long time. Then he sat on the bed, resting his head on his hands. This is going to sound strange, but I usually don't pay much attention to what my wife wears, sorry. No need to apologize, most men don't. Sergeant Fleming joined them. She was wearing the same outfit she had worn during sex with him, a lilac blouse and a short skirt. And as she lifted her skirt, I remembered something else she'd said. Go on, she said. I have 18 pairs of panties, Greg, but I don't wear them with Roger. I just checked, all 18 are here. The only thing missing is her crotchless pantyhose. But oddly enough, her hiking gear and boots are missing too. Quite an exhaustive description, Sergeant, she said. And here's another thing, Greg said, pulling a Netflix t-shirt out of another drawer. Roger probably works around here somewhere. The cops took detailed notes on the location of the cabin before they left, and Greg gave them the key. He himself sat in the living room and reminisced about recent events. Despite Susan's precautions, Greg's idea had paid off. He had placed Elvis in the bathroom, and after she had looked around the bedroom, he had put him back where he belonged. Thus, Greg witnessed the sex. Susan's condom trick was the most impressive. But his trick of planting a camera and tape recorder on Elvis was inspiring. He heard all the details of the murder plot. From that point on, it was simple. The clinking of glasses, running to the kitchen for the cork, pouring the unfinished wine down the sink, and pouring himself a new one, sprinkling her Rohypnol while Susan signed the cork. As soon as she passed out, he stripped her naked and laid her on the bed with her ass up. He then poured more wine with 2 more pills and placed it on the coffee table next to the note. Drink it all first, Roger, then take off all your clothes. Warm your hands in front of the fireplace and come on, fuck me good. Greg signaled from the bedroom and then waited in the kitchen. Roger drank some wine, which only started to take effect when he was finally able to take off his boots. He huddled by the fireplace trying to get his pants off from the wet weather. Greg then dressed his lovers in their camping gear and carried them to the boat. It was already dark when they set off on their journey across the lake. Despite the icy water, the swim back to the water was exhilarating. Next, dry clothes, carefully washed goggles, a locked cabin, and a return home. He guessed what would happen next. A rental car in Susan's name is parked by the lake. The boat should drift back to shore, toward the lake outlet. The cabin will reveal recent activity and slutty clothing. Either the police will drag them into the lake or Susan and Roger will voluntarily surface. Of course, suspicion would arise. Why did the lovers go there so soon after him? An argument? A suicide pact? Anyway, it's done. There was one last detail to take care of. Greg made his way to the bedroom and picked up the teddy bear. In the backyard was a metal barrel for burning trash. He checked it for dry paper and leaves and set the gasoline can next to it. He reached under his high collar and picked up a piece of fur. Thanks again, Marcus. He pulled out a small recording device. He wouldn't need the camera after all. He didn't need the divorce. He turned it around and peered into the beer hall. Who would notice the absence of one eye, especially with a tiny camera replacing it? She brought you from the bathroom. Your job was to keep an eye on her. Greg Loft threw her into the barrel and doused her with gasoline, then tossed in a lit match. When the flames subsided, he went back into the house. He sat down on the couch with a large glass of Aberlour and said loudly, Elvis has left the building. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.